Hey guys, I want to welcome you back to another episode on J of All Trades. Today I'm standing in a basement here, and up against this wall behind me here, I want to build out a fireplace. Now, one of the great things is that there's already electric on this wall, so I can move that electric forward and use that as power for the TV, as well as the electric fireplace insert that I'll be using here in the bottom. Now, I'm going to be showing you guys step by step how to build out a frame for this fireplace, how to put on the walls, and also we're going to be installing ledger stone right up against those walls. So stay tuned and let's get started. The first thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to be using this stud finder to locate all the studs behind the wall in the area that I want to build my fireplace. Then I'll use a straight edge and I'll make a line to mark out exactly where the studs are. And I'll be using all these guidelines here to help me to build my frame out for this fireplace. Note that you'll want to put a level up against your straight edge just to make sure that you're making a straight line and that you're going to get the stud every single time. Once I finish marking where my studs are, I cut 4 pieces of 2x4 that are approximately 6 feet in length, and then I place them horizontally along this wall. You'll want to make sure that you place this piece exactly where you want it for the framing. And then I'm securing it here now with the framing nailer straight into the studs. Using a framing nailer like this makes this process a lot quicker and a lot easier. In order to put the other 4 pieces on, I'm going to be using the straight edge and making a mark to make sure exactly where those pieces are going to land. This will ensure that all these 4 pieces are going to be lined up perfectly. Now I'm going to be spacing them out evenly, and I'm just taking some measurements and making some marks exactly where I'm going to be placing these pieces. When I'm installing these pieces, I'm ensuring that I'm putting a level right on there to make sure that this is straight, and then I'll secure it straight into the studs. You can also secure these pieces with 3-inch screws and an impact driver if you don't have a framing nailer. If you guys are wondering exactly what type of framing nailer I'm using here, I'm going to include a link in the description so you guys can check it out if you'd like, and you can go out there and get this framing nailer. Now that we've gotten these 4 pieces secured straight to the studs, it will provide a very strong support for the frame. First, I'm going to build the first piece of the frame by marking exactly where I'm going to have my cross pieces coming out. And this is just to ensure that they're all evenly spaced out. You can choose to make your fireplace as wide and as deep as you want. Due to conserving some space, I've decided to make this fireplace come out just about a foot away from the wall. But you can do yours even further if you'd like, depending on what your preference is. Here I'm securing some 3-inch pieces to this riser here, and I'm going to be putting them all along this piece. You want to do this piece first before putting this up against the wall, because it will be impossible to drive these nails into these 3-inch pieces once you have it up against the wall. Here's another look at this in a different angle so you can see exactly what it looks like. You can have those pieces longer depending on how far you want the fireplace to come out from the wall. Once again, the level is going to be your best friend here throughout this entire project, and it's important to make sure that everything is plumb and straight. Now I'm able to secure this piece straight into these horizontal supports, and I can continue to build my frame out from here. So now I'm going to take another piece here and attach it straight to this piece, and before I secure this again, I want to make sure that this is straight. Now I'm going to repeat the same process and build it out for the other side. This is actually the first time that I'm building a fireplace using a framing nailer like this, and I've got to say that this thing really improves my workflow. It makes it much faster and easier than driving screws into this. I think one of the biggest things apart from saving time is that you're also saving quite a bit of energy. Next, I'm going to build a framing here for my electric fireplace, and I've already taken the measurements of that fireplace, and I'm just basically building the shell for it, and that electric fireplace will sit right in this framing. I'm also going to be attaching bottom supports here, and my actual electric fireplace will be about a foot above the ground. It almost feels like I'm building a puzzle here, but I'm depending on all the measurements that I took of the fireplace, and it'll all start to make sense once this is completed here. These are the little supports that are going to be below the fireplace, and this is going to keep it elevated above the ground. I'm evenly just spacing these out just to make sure that any weight that sits on these will be evenly distributed here. This piece at the top here completes the enclosure for the electric fireplace here, and you just want to make sure that this is lined up correctly, and I've made marks to just ensure that I'm attaching that in the right spot. Now I can flip this over and complete the bottom piece. In order to give the electric fireplace enclosure a little bit more stability, I'm going to be attaching 2 supports on each side, and these 2 short pieces will also help me to secure that fireplace enclosure right to these side and back supports. Now I will take this entire piece and position it right into place, and this is fitting nice and tight. All I have to do is just give it a couple kicks and it's going to fall right into position there. Here you can see how the edges of this frame goes right above those little supports that I installed. Now I can secure this entire piece to the rest of the framing. Now I'm going to frame out the upper part of this fireplace, and I'm going to build this part of the framing away from the fireplace as well. And then we're going to take the entire piece and secure it to the rest of the framing. Here I'm just making marks of exactly where I'll be putting the studs, and then I'll be securing those studs exactly where I made my marks. Standard spacing for studs are about 16 inches apart, but depending on the width of your fireplace, you can always custom build your fireplace framing to exactly what you want it to be. Now I could flip this over and put the other piece in, and once again I'm evenly spacing this out to match the other end. Now I have this framing that resembles a square here, and we're going to lift this whole piece up and we're going to just drop it right into place. If you have to, you can always use a hammer to just tap this in place. I like to call it using a little persuasion to get it in there. After ensuring that everything was lined up, I secured this entire piece to the rest of the framing. Now I'm going to add 2 supports in between these 2 middle pieces, and this is going to give it some added stability because I am going to be having a big TV mounted to this fireplace, and I want to make sure that there's going to be a solid support here for that TV. Here I'm installing the second piece slightly above the other, and that is just to allow me to nail it straight in. Now that I have the entire framing complete, it's time to move the electric over, and we're going to be bringing it forward and moving it over to the right. We're also going to be using the power from that outlet to also hardwire the power for our fireplace directly to the same power source. Keep in mind that you can always get an electrician to help you out with this part if you're not fully comfortable with doing this electrical work. If you feel confident enough to do it, Just remember, the main thing is safety first. So make sure that you kill that breaker that is feeding the power to these outlets, and then you'll be able to move them anywhere you'd like. For this project, I've decided to reuse the same box and move it over to the new location. In order to remove it, I had to remove a little section of sheetrock here with my oscillating tool, and that's a very handy tool to do any plunge cuts, and it was able to allow me to get the box out. Once I got the box out, I was able to disconnect everything and move the box over to the new location. And I was also able to extend this piece over to the box and then wire everything up. To give this outlet added stability, I added a piece of 2x4 right on the other side of the box to make sure that the box was secure. The last thing you need is a box shaking all over the place, because when you're plugging in something or unplugging it, the box should not shake around too much. If it is, it might be an unsafe situation and that can cause a fire, so it's a really good idea to make sure that this box is secure. Here is the power source coming into the box, and I'm going to secure it to the bottom. Now I'm going to hook up the first outlet. Please note the color of the screws on the outlet. The neutral goes to the silver, and the line goes to the gold screws. And of course, don't forget to hook up your ground, which is the green wire, to this green screw. Now I'm going to take a jumper and jump from this screw on the top, and we're going to take this neutral and we're going to take it over to the second outlet. We're going to attach it to the silver screw on the second outlet. Now I'm going to take a section of black wire and I'm going to jump it from this line on the first outlet over to the second outlet, and I'm going to attach it to the gold screw on the second outlet. Now I'm going to attach a jumper from the ground of the first outlet, and I'll ground the second outlet to this same grounding screw. Now I'm going to take a feed from the second outlet to feed over to the fireplace. The electric fireplace will be hardwired to this. Of course, the white wire goes over to the silver screw, and of course the black goes to the gold. Our green wire goes to the ground. And our feed is connected for the fireplace. Now I'm just going to put some tape around here, just for some added protection. And I'll leave these outlets just pushed in here, because once we start putting on the wall on here, we'll need to make a cutout for these outlets and then pass them through that cutout. Before I install the wall, I'm going to be doubling up on the center stud. This will allow me to reinforce the frame to hold even more weight, and it will give me a solid structure to secure a piece of plywood for the TV mount. Here I'm trying out some 3-inch screws, and I can definitely tell you it takes a little bit more work to do this with the screws rather than using the framing nailer. Today I'll be using 1/4-inch hardy board, and here I have a special blade that cuts hardy board, and I'm going to include a link in the description so you guys can check that out if you'd like. This blade is specially designed to cut cement board. It gives me clean cuts every single time. However, you'd want to do these cuts outside because it generates quite a bit of dust. To secure the hardy board, I'm using special 1.25-inch screws, and this is specifically designed for hardy board. I'll include a link in the description if you'd like to pick some up. When you drive these screws in, as you get closer, you do not want to put too much pressure. You want to kind of feel your way into it because then you can crack the hardy board. Once you fall into a rhythm, it's pretty straightforward to screw this stuff in. I like to make lines just along the stud so I don't miss it. The reason why I'm using hardy board for this project is because I'll be putting ledger stone on this wall. And hardy board is perfect for wet conditions. It's great for tile work and it's great for stone work. Unfortunately, sheetrock doesn't do too well with the moisture, so when I put tin set on here, I'll be sure that it'll do well with the stone. I usually try to put these screws about a foot apart to make sure that this gets secured properly. Here's a look at the first piece fully secured to the wall. Now it's time to mark out those cross pieces for the studs so that I can know exactly where they are, because later on we'll be using that for the TV mount. For the second part of the wall, I'm going to be doing a cutout for the outlet. For this part, you can use an old damaged blade because this really does mess up regular blades, or you can also use a carbide or diamond blade. Here you can see that I passed the outlets to that cutout, and now I'm securing this piece to the wall. Now I can secure the outlets to the box. Now I can put the cover right over. For the bottom pieces, I'll be using these two pieces of hardy board here. Now it's time to finish off the front with two side pieces here. Finally, we're going to secure hardy board to the sides. Now that most of the wall is on, you can see that the fireplace is starting to take shape. Here is a look at the fireplace with the hardy board completely installed. And now it's time to install our electric fireplace into position and wire it up to that wiring. For this particular electric fireplace, we're going to need to remove the glass in the front. And to do that, we'll have to remove this screw here on the left and one screw on the right. Now we can carefully lift this piece of glass out of position, and we're going to put it over to the side. Next, we'll remove all the packaging out of here. Now that we've removed the glass and the packaging, here on the left, on the inside, you can see that there's two holes here, and we're going to be actually driving screws through those holes and into that framing. Here on the other side of the fireplace, you can notice that there are identical holes here as well, and we'll be screwing that in on the right side. This will ensure that the fireplace stays in position and does not fall out. But before we install this fireplace in, we'll need to wire it up. I like to always use the electrical tape to make sure that there's added protection. Now that this is all wired up, we're ready to install the fireplace. I recommend going little by little until it's fully flush. Once I had the fireplace fully seated against the walls, I was ready to drive the screws into the sides. This fireplace came with some crystals, so we're going to spread the crystals all along the bottom. And they're actually made out of plastic, it's not real crystal. So that's a good thing, because if you drop these, they will shatter if they're real crystals. But since this is made out of plastic, I don't have to worry about that. I'll just spread this all along the bottom here. And these plastic crystals sit right on top of an LED light strip. And when it's lit, it creates a really cool effect. This is how it should look after you're done. Now we can reinstall the glass cover right over this. You want to be extra careful with this, because if you drop it, you can imagine what will happen here. So I would strongly recommend having a second person help you with this. To secure this glass piece, all you have to do is just install those 2 screws that we first removed. Now it's time to just test this out before we move on to the stone. All I have to do is hit the power and enjoy the effect of the fireplace. These plastic crystals are really cool. I'll include a link in the description for you guys to check out this fireplace if you'd like. It really does change the entire feel of the room already, and we haven't even put on the stone yet. But before we put on the stone, let's put a piece of plywood here for the TV mount. Ideally, you'd want this piece of plywood to be centered where the TV mount will be. I'm going to make sure that this is nice and level and plumb, and I'm also going to make sure that this is secured properly into the studs, which will serve as a very nice, strong platform for the TV mount. The great thing about this is that the TV mount can be screwed anywhere on this piece of plywood. This is a 3/4 inch thick piece of plywood, but you can definitely use 1/2 inch as well. Now I'm ready to put some stone on this fireplace. And here I'm going to be using ledger stone, which is not very thick stone, and I find it very easy to work with. This particular wet saw has measurements at the corner of the rail, and I can make cuts all the way up to 10.5 inches. And here I've completed my first cut in just a few seconds, and I'm ready for my second cut. When you're cutting with this saw, you want to make sure that you don't force this too much, because the stone can actually break. You want to just take your time and let the saw blade do its job, and you'll avoid cracking the stone. This is the mortar that I'll be mixing today, and this mortar is white and it's by VersaBond. You can find this stuff at your local Home Depot or Lowe's. To mix this stuff, you'll want some water and pour some of this stuff into a bucket as well. And you'll be mixing it all together until you have a peanut butter consistency. I'll be using this mixer with the screw gun, and this makes it a lot easier than trying to do it by hand. You'll need to add some water as you mix, but try not to add too much water at first. Try to give it a little bit, mix, and then add as needed. This stuff is starting to look like pancake mix, and as you keep mixing and mixing, you'll notice that it starts clumping up if it doesn't have enough water. So just keep adding a little bit at a time until it starts getting to look like peanut butter. Once it looks like peanut butter, you're ready to spread this on the wall and install your stone. To install ledger stone, you'll want to use a 1/2 inch by 1/2 inch square notched trowel, because this ensures maximum mortar coverage and adhesion. First, you're going to use the flat side to spread a little thick layer of mortar on the wall. Then once you have enough mortar on there, you're going to use the notch side of the trowel to run through that mortar, and that will give you an even pattern to install your stone right on top. When you put the stone up against the mortar, you want to press it and lightly shake it so that the mortar can make proper contact with the stone, and this way you'll get maximum adhesion. Another thing to do is to make sure that your bottom piece is level, and this will ensure that the ones that go on top will also fall in line. I like to also periodically check that everything is going level just to avoid any mistakes. Now that the sides are complete, it's time to install the stone in the front. When I'm installing this stone, I'm going up against the bottom of the lip of the fireplace. So this is not overlapping the lip. You want this stone to be sitting flat up against the wall. On the edges of the corner here, I'm just overlapping a little bit into the other stone on the side. One thing you'll notice is that I add mortar as I go along, and the reason why I do this is because I don't want the mortar to start drying on me. So this will ensure that the mortar is the proper consistency in order to adhere to this stone. If for some reason you have to stop and you have mortar on the wall, you should scrape off the mortar before it starts to set, and this will buy you some time to maybe make some cuts or make some adjustments, and then you can reapply mortar. I'm going to be installing this stone around this piece of plywood because I want that area free for the TV mount. The TV is going to span almost the full width of this fireplace, so we won't be able to see any of the plywood or the outlet when the TV is mounted. I'm going to be installing some stone strips all along this plywood here, and this is to ensure that the stone that goes on top of it is going to be level and straight as well. I almost actually dropped a whole section of ledger stone here, but thankfully I had some quick reflexes and was able to get it secured. Now it's time to put the last row of ledger stone at the top. Since my ledger stone is level, I noticed that the ceiling has a little belly, but it's not too bad. This tells me that the ceiling is not quite flat, and we can always fill in any little creases with some mortar. Now it's time to secure the TV mount to this piece of plywood. And after taking some measurements, here would be the perfect position for the TV. The great thing is I can position this mount anywhere along this plywood. Now that the stone is in position, this fireplace is looking beautiful, and it creates such a nice ambiance for this room. The space is completely transformed, and this is the way the fireplace looks with the TV mounted. I'm really happy that you guys joined me today. Please remember to like and subscribe to my channel if you found this video to be valuable, so you can see more videos like this. I'll see you guys on the next one.